it's hard to impart stuff to our children if we're not modeling it. So what I first would say is, as parents, we have to be hungry and we have to read and research and look into stuff. And we can educate in so many ways subtly. So, for example, I'm loving the 2 shirts that y'all are rocking, Rainbow Black Joy, and I see you got some of the ancestors.
Yes.
It doesn't have to always be boring. We could make it still be us. But when our children see that we're passionate, that we're interested in learning and growing in our history and our heritage, believe it or not, that's going to rub off too.
Hello, and welcome to the Bold Black Girls Podcast. I'm Aries.
And I'm Kim.
And we have our first guest of season 6. I'm super excited. So let me read his bio, and then I'm going to bring him on, and we're going to chat. This is, I think, what's today? It's February 2nd. Yes. It will be. So This is going to be our kickoff for Black History Month. So we're super excited. And today we have a guest. His name is Marcus Sankofa. He is an acclaimed researcher, historian, and educator. He regularly facilitates conversations surrounding the African American historical experience and its present-day implications. Some of his most recent work includes being the keynote speaker at the Lewis Museum. You know John Lewis, y'all know who that is. The largest African American museum in Maryland, and as a guest on multiple podcasts. He holds a master's degree in African American Studies from Morgan State University. And when Marcus gets on here, hello, there he is. Hi, Marcus. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
He has a background in teaching in like the K through 12 educational system around, and he'll explain more of that. But very similar to last year when we had Dr. Jania Hoover, a good girlfriend of ours, come on to talk to us about Black history stuff. She was going to be a speaker for me for my company, and she had a conflict and was like, but I got somebody else I want to bring on. And so Marcus and I spoke and talked, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be perfect because he really has something unique. I think that when it comes to teaching like Black history or things that should be taught, specifically around groups that may not know a lot about non-Black folks, basically, that don't know a lot about the proper way to teach Black students and Black history and all these kind of things. So that was like right up my alley because I'm like, as you're talking to folks that may not know a lot about Black history, there's a bridge that needs to be built sometimes, right? So he has a very unique way of doing that. So very excited to have you. And he killed it, of course. They were loving it. They were asking all kind of questions, which I did not know they were going to do. And so it was really, really great. But thanks again, Marcus. We're so glad to have you join us today.
Thank you so much. It is a delight and pleasure to be with you two here for this conversation. It's a very important conversation.
Very important.
So let's get into it. Let's talk.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, so tell me, what was your catalyst? What inspired you to even start to study African American studies?
Wow, that is a great question. I would say a lot of different experiences. One that comes to mind first, I remember being a child, probably I would say elementary age, 5 or 6 or so. And I remember on TV, they used to have these Feed the Children commercials. And I used to remember seeing these impoverished African children. I remember the ads, the advertisements for such and such amount of money a day. You could donate or pledge and come and save and rescue these poor, wretched, dirty, malnourished African children from their misery.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember them looking looking so awful. I mean, I remember flies crying.
The flies,
It's
the
the
flies, it's the flies.
It was not a good look. And I remember thinking to myself, and I believe I also asked my parents, I said, I don't see any other groups of people that are on this screen. You know, all I see is those who have a similar skin color as myself. And something about that didn't sit with me, but I was young, so I continued to go on about, my life as a child. I also remember for a summer camp, I was probably a few years older than what I just mentioned to you both. And I remember we took a field trip to a museum. I don't remember what museum it was, but I remember looking at a small, uh, brief documentary on Frederick Douglass. I remember they had shown us the documentary on Frederick Douglass, and there was a scene that really stood out. And Frederick Douglass, him being one who was born in Maryland, he was born into slavery. His mother was enslaved. His father was a slave master. He ended up being able to gain his freedom, and he did a lot of different things, being an orator or speaker, a lecturer, so on and so forth. But during his stint, the time as a slave, he actually had a classic episode or a very famous incident in his life where he had a clash with the slave breaker because he was not being submissive and doing what he was supposed to do. So there was a person named Edward Covey. And so Covey was a slave master. Long story short, they had it out. They fought, and he fought back, and he rose up. And so that right there stood with me. And I remember asking my teacher, he was a black male, big ups to all the black educators all throughout the country. But I asked him, I said, wow, like, why would they enslave Frederick Douglass? Why would he have no privileges, no rights? Why was he disrespected? Why was he so undervalued and underappreciated? It was so different, especially coming from a household where I had a loving family. My mother and father was involved. There was a lot of love. But I remember that day, the teacher told me, he said, there's been some horrific things that have happened in our country. It's up to you not to let it happen again. And I remember those words stuck with me. So those are just two things I could think of. And it's been a number of other things in time as I've evolved and grown and went about my life that have contributed to me going on this path. But I can say those two things definitely stood out to me and it played a part in what leads me to do the work I do today.
What do you think the reason for, because now that I'm older, I feel like I have a different view and I have kids, so of why we separate Black history from just straight American history, right? I mean, I know in the school system, the curriculum is built a certain way. And obviously now we're facing some conversations around, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about that part, right? Like we're taking things out of history. And if we actually just looked, obviously we're in Black History Month, right? There was a reason someone, and I'm sure you'll share with us kind of why it started and why we started a focus on like Black history in particular.
Sure. I would say that you see now a lot of this parallel thing where you have Black history and then this, it's separate, it's isolated. And to be honest, there are some who are of the perspective we don't need a Black history. There are some who feel as though Black history is American history, so we don't need to separate it. But a lot of those who uphold the perspective that there needs to be a specific definitive Black history is because it brings to the forefront so much that has not been taught, so much that has not been addressed. One of the things that Dr. Anthony Browder speaks to, and Dr. Anthony Browder is a historian. He considers himself a cultural memory specialist. He has a quote that says, quote, "The past has been erased and the erasure has been forgotten." So there's so much that Black people, Africans in America, African Americans, Blacks in America, whatever you want to refer to us as, there are so many things that we've invented. We have laid the foundation for this country being what it was. We have laid the foundation for this country being the financial being able to amass as much wealth as it's been able to amass, but yet you still find the devaluing of Black lives, in the media, and not wanting to be taught. You see critical race theory, these things throughout the country. These are hot button topics and issues. You find, that there's a lack of focus of it being taught. You find that there's just so much that has not been taught. So you find that a lot of times people are trying to say, okay, we don't need to infuse this. We want to give it all the attention it needs. We want to give it all the attention it deserves, because whenever we try to infuse it under so-called the melting pot, right, then we're going to lose. It's going to become watered down. We're going to really not give it the full emphasis and attention that we need to. But once again, that erasure is really huge. And when we talk about the erasure of history, especially Black history, historically in ancient times up until now, you find in ancient Africa where, archaeologists and scientists and researchers have discovered and have researched and have been able to prove that life as we know it originated and emanated on the continent of Africa. However, it didn't stop the invaders, the European invaders, from coming in and defacing monuments and burning down the libraries and the scrolls and the pyramids and in the temples. So you find erasure in that way. You find historical figures such as Imhotep, who was on the continent of Africa, who was a philosopher, who was a multi-genius, who was one who did so many things. There's movies like The Mummy and different things where he's whitewashed. So you find that erasure is taking on many forms, even moving fast forward to more recent times, even literacy. On the slave plantation, African Americans or the enslaved was not allowed to read. There were laws in place to keep them from writing, learning, and there were fines and different things like that, imprisonment, lynching, being beat, and all of these things. So I'm saying all that to say this erasure is really, really, really critical. And I think a lot of times it's the emphasis is on, okay, we're not trying to merge. We want to give it all the attention that it deserves. And we want to not take any more chances on watering it down or further erasing it.
That's like our podcast, right? Like, absolutely. I feel like when we're going through like just corporate and talking about DEI and all these different things, we started having the women of color conversation, and we started noticing that don't mean Black women, right? That's an easy way to say we've got diversity, and then Black women like out of the picture, because we're like, these are other women of color that we like more than y'all, so we're gonna put them in the picture and then show that we still have something, but it's still taking the Black part out. So like, I'm very adamant about when I'm talking about women of color or when I'm talking about Black specific, right? Because so many times I've had to interject in conversations where I'm like, yeah, but that's not what we talking about, Right. So I could totally see that, as a good enough reason, to, shine the light on it, because we can't wait on America to get it together and everybody to just be like, yeah, let's acknowledge all the great things. There's still going to be people who are going to be super biased, who are creating these laws and this curriculum and all this stuff. That is, the school system is where we're really getting our education for the most part, more hours out of the day, right? So you're getting taught a specific way. So as parents, we have to
redefine that narrative,
do something different.
Yes.
So I kind of wanted us to lean in a little bit more on that critical race theory, which from what I know about it, it's not even being taught in schools, but that's the language that they're using to kind of just say, well, we don't want white people to feel bad about history if we tell them the real. So what is this whole thing about critical race theory?
Right. So the thing with critical race theory, and it's important to actually talk about even what it is, because a lot of times there's these debates and there's these contentious discussions, but we're taking out of context what things really are. So critical race theory is something that derived in the 60s actually, and it really was in the legal sector of academia, in the higher education aspect of it, not really K through 12. And so what it calls to attention is, with the gains that happened in civil rights, and with all of the efforts to bring about some type of racial equality and moving away from these inequities, why do we still nevertheless have the discrimination that we have? Why do we still nevertheless have the racism that we have? Why do we still have the unjust treatment, the unbiased? And so that's what critical race theory is supposed to call. It's really supposed to focus on that. And it's also supposed to center Black voices, Black perspectives. And so even with the last question that was put out, there's, for so long, our voices have been suppressed. Our voices have been silenced. We haven't been able to express ourselves by writing or speaking. And once again, you find the same thing. And with critical race theory, I mean, this is huge. I mean, in a number of Southern school jurisdictions, you have board meetings that are very, 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 very hostile. You have laws being put in place to keep certain things from being taught. A lot of people and there's a lot of different perspectives on what the intent is and how to go about teaching critical race theory. So it's a complicated issue. I know that there's a banned books movement that is also going parallel side by side with this too. And so I have a study here, or some data from the American Library Association. And last year, supposedly over 273 books were banned based on censorship, and they were taken out of the schools and they were taken out of the libraries. So this erasure, once again, you have a lot of white families who are concerned about their children getting this information, and the feelings of guilt and the feelings of being uncomfortable. And, the past is just what it is. The past, let's move on. It's 2022. It has nothing to do with us. It's not a blame game. I mean, there's all of these types of things that are coming into play. There have been some who have felt as though, from a political standpoint, since these young high school age students or young people in general are going to be able to have access to the polls to vote, if we give them that education, then they're going to be able to exercise that when it comes to the voting booth and to the polls. So we see that, this thing is very political. Even Nicole Hannah-Jones, who came out with the 1619 Project, which, in my opinion, as a journalist, I think it's a fabulous work that really centers African-American culture and history, and tells a story that for so long has not been told like it needs to be told. She had been denied tenure, and the 1619 Project has been denied access to a lot of different educational spaces. So that's the recurring theme, is this erasure. And one of the things that I think is important, though, is to give the historical context to this. So just like I mentioned, a lot of times we'll see critical race theory and we'll get upset, we'll get bothered, we'll get angry, we'll get, these things will come to us. And that's okay, but this is not new. This is not anything that is a new phenomenon, so to speak, in terms of really suppressing Black expression, Black voice. And even times whenever we have expressed ourselves, there's been so many different things that we've worried about in terms of, okay, am I going to have some kind of consequence? Am I going to have some kind of penalty? Am I going to is my life in jeopardy? And we still see that to this day. I was even looking at an article earlier today that was talking about Amanda Gorman, who actually was a young lady who gave who recited the poetry,
poet.
poet for the recent inauguration last year. And she was saying in the article, she was afraid of her life, and she still is fearful. She was really afraid to get up there and recite that poetry that she did so eloquently, so in such an awesome manner, because she was afraid of the backlash. She didn't know if white supremacists were going to come after her, her family. She was going to be made a target, all from expressing herself. So you find that critical race theory a way to educate the masses, but also be able to especially tell the story that hasn't been told. There's systematic, continuous efforts to keep that on the hush.
Right.
So that way, minds can't be empowered, minds can't be inspired, minds can't be motivated, minds can't, become agents of social change in their own right. And so one of the things that I would posit is we think sometimes, or a lot of times, some of the perspectives are, oh, well, that was the past, let's leave it in the past. But for many Blacks, African Americans, there's historical trauma. So we can act like this stuff ain't happening if we want to, but this stuff is in our body. This stuff is in our DNA. This is why when we're driving down the street, if we see the police, we might feel a certain kind of way. Right. This is why whenever our children might not come home when we want them to come home, we get a little anxious and might feel a certain kind of way. This is why being comfortable in Black bodies, well, that's a continuous thing. Because of the historical trauma, some people that I know in my own family are not comfortable driving in certain places or going down south because they feel a visceral body reaction, not necessarily what happened in contemporary times, but their mind takes them back to what's happened in the past. So what I always say is the past is very much linked to and connected to the present. And that's what Carter G. Woodson was trying to speak to, was the father of Black history, when he helped to usher in this Black history or this Negro history movement that we have come to recognize today.
Which is crazy because, they said the Holocaust survivors, they did some kind of study that said that it's in their DNA. Like, people can still feel, I feel like I still feel my ancestors from, all that time. And I think too, we carry on traditional things that we probably should stop carrying over.
Yes.
That are specifically from that time that keep us attached to some of that stuff too, right? Like, knowing the history helps us, we talk about getting beat, beating our kids and doing these different things. A lot of that comes from some of that,
from the past,
things that we had to do, the correction. We're on here talking about not negotiating and all these different things. Well, a lot of that comes from how we were taught, and things that we brought in as well. So we have to know what it is in order to, some of it we might need to detach from, some of it we need to know because it's still here today. Things are happening that we need to actually take action on and just have awareness. For me, when it's time to go vote, I think about the people who fought to get that right, so those are important. And then as parents, being able to supplement that education for our kids so they know what's going on. I don't want my kids in class and not knowing what the hell is going on when the teacher say something, or bring something home and they thinking this was facts. And I'm like,
they want to put that narrative in the school system. And let's be honest, Marcus. So I'm from Chicago. I went to HBCU elementary school. We had a Black program every month, but now moving out here, that's pretty non-existent. And so when my daughter came home, I was like, you don't have a Black history program? I was upset, highly upset. Right. And so you talked about empowering and inspiring. Like, how do we educate our children on the importance of why we should vote? Because they don't know the history of how our ancestors had to fight in order to vote because they couldn't vote. So in terms of academics, how can we ensure that history is being passed down by generation from generation so that they are informed on the importance of why they should do what they should do to keep things going and be those change agents?
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a lot of different things I could say to that. And I think the best way that I could be able to answer that question is to also bring into the conversation Carter G. Woodson, because I think his story is very parallel to the question you asked. Carter G. Woodson is very much responsible for the Black History celebrations and Black History Month as we know it, even though in 1926, it actually started out as Negro History Week. And so Carter G. Woodson was born in 1875 and he was born. His parents were enslaved. He was born in Virginia, and he came from very humble beginnings. He speaks in his writings and in his works that, he had to actually retire early, because his mother had, so he could take off his clothes, so his mother could wash his clothes, so he can have something to wear the next day. He said that, he could only work, or he could only go to school about maybe 4 or 5 months out of the year, or try to focus on his education 4 or 5 months out of the year, because he had to help his parents make ends meet. And he would eventually go into West Virginia, and he would become a coal miner, and he worked hard. Anyone who knows anything about going into coal mining is something that is a hard, back-breaking, laborious,
and mentally.
And he met a gentleman when he was a teen there, named Oliver Jones. And Oliver Jones was in the Civil War. He was a soldier, and he saw something in Carter G. Woodson, and he said, "You know what? I can't read, but I like to learn vicariously through those who could read." And so he actually gave the resources and put newspapers and different documents in Carter's hands and said, "Okay, young man, after we work, we're going to come to my residence with a gentleman who work with us, and we're going to have you read. You're going to read your newspaper to us and tell us about what's going on in politics and the world, national affairs." And so Carter ended up developing his skill set of being a historian by reading what was going on in the press to them. And when they had questions, and whenever they would debate, and whenever they would get curious, they would say, "Carter, look this up. Find out the answer to this. Look into that." So he actually would go and look and research and search and try to find the answers. And that right there helped him build his reading skills. It built his curiosity more. It helped him with his foundational research skills. And that right there set the foundation. And his parents, they came from humble beginnings. They were illiterate, but they still wanted him, Carter, to learn. They still wanted him to develop himself. And so Carter G. Woodson would end up becoming the second African-American to graduate with a PhD from Harvard University. The first one was W.E.B. Du Bois. He had an intense work ethic. He was known for working 18 hours a day. He would stop at nothing to make sure that the narrative of Black inferiority, that Blacks had no history worth celebrating, that he made sure that he wanted to correct the historical record and prove and demonstrate that was not true. And so he has a quote that he's known for, and the quote was a quote that he had in 1926, the same year Negro History Week came about. And he says these words, quote, "If a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition. It becomes a negligible factor in thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. In such a millennium, the achievements of the Negro properly set forth will crown him as a factor in early human progress and a maker of civilization." So what he's basically saying there is, Blacks did do something. We did achieve something. We did invent things. We have done all types of things, and we need to get credit for it. And he knew that self-concept, self-identity, self-worth, self-esteem, how you view yourself was inextricably linked to history. And so he even says when he was in college, his professor was speaking to how Blacks didn't have a history that was worthwhile. Mind you, this is in college. He's at Harvard. This is his professor, one who is supposed to be an authority in academia, saying Blacks ain't did nothing. And so he stood up and said, "Sir, no, that's not true." And so
that's what I want my kids to do.
Right. And so his professor said, "Well, prove me wrong."
And he did.
And he spent the rest of his life writing articles, writing books, building institutions, working with school systems, working with Black educators, working with Black teachers, doing all types of things to correct the historical master narrative that would say Blacks are inferior and Blacks have no history worth celebrating. So that is what Carter G. Woodson devoted his life to. Now, to bring it all back full circle to our children, well, it's hard to impart stuff to our children if we're not modeling it. So what I first would say is, as parents, we have to be hungry and we have to read and research and look into stuff. And we can educate in so many ways subtly. So, for example, I'm loving the 2 shirts that y'all are rocking, Red Black Joy, and I see you got some of the ancestors.
Yes.
It doesn't have to always be boring. We could make it still be us. But when our children see that we're passionate, that we're interested in learning and growing in our history and our heritage, believe it or not, that's going to rub off too. And I can tell you a personal example of that. So, my family, we celebrate Kwanzaa every year, and every time of the year, as we go into the next year, we have our Kwanzaa candles and our celebrations. And, Kwanzaa is a holiday that celebrates African culture, tradition, and heritage. And my daughter's 3. And she looks and she's like, oh, okay, so we got the red, the black, the green candles, and we have, the Kanara, and we have all of the different elements. And I remember earlier this year, we was a little bit late putting up the decorations. Kwanzaa normally is 7 days. It starts on the 26th of December and flows on into the 1st of the new year. And she's like, Daddy, we're going to put up Kwanzaa. So, Daddy, what's up? We late. So, as parents, we have to first model the behavior that we want our children to show. The next thing is there's so many resources that we could tap into. So Carter G. Woodson wasn't one of the other things he was an advocate for, was saying that there's 2 types of educations. There's one education that you will be given. The school system, the slave master, the establishment, they're going to give you that. Okay, fine. But the second is the one you give yourself. So critical race theory or whatever else they're trying to give, okay, but that's not stopping us from going to the library. That's not stopping us from going on Google and researching and looking up things, or going on websites. That's not going to stop us from talking to our family members and learning our own family history and really tapping into our own roots and our own heritage. So that's something that's going to be important. Continuing to talk to our children and really be in touch with them and connect with them. I know a lot of children are really frustrated because, from my experience of working with them, they feel that when it comes to anything that's related to Black history, it's negative. Like, even at school, every time we would, like, when students could have a chance to sign up for my class, African American Studies, or here comes the Black History Month events and different things like that, students a lot of times had a negative outlook on it before they even did anything, because they were so used to, okay, their point of reference is going to slavery, whips and chains, brutality, victimization. So as we're teaching this to our children, it's important for not just our children, but us to know that there was resilience, there's courage, that there was agency. It's important for them to know that, we own businesses, we had relationships. There is a thing called Black joy. Our experience is not only solely trauma. Yes, that's a part of it, but we're so much more than that. So as we're teaching this, we got to go beyond the simple, easy, same old stuff. Right. But we gotta really get into the more complex, broader, things. And that's why nowadays, and you see this with Black Lives Matter, there's attempts to try to really get into the nuance and all the different complexity of the Black experience, identity and gender and your ethnicity, where you come from. There's so much richness. And so there's a lot of educational material. I could even give some resources when we're done, but these are just some of the things that I think that we can do. And I would also say, if we can, connect with other organizations or entities or businesses or institutions that are also about empowering Black people, history, all of that. We don't have to do it in silos by ourselves.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up about the Black joy. I wore this shirt for a reason, because that is something by me with the kids, because I they were doing saying the same stuff. Like they'll be like, I don't want to, it's like, I don't want to hear that. Like, and so getting creative in ways to show like, oh, look at this person, and what they did something great, like how they got to this point. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super important. And I see the interest grow when I'm more on the positive things. And I'm like, we weren't just, we invented a lot of stuff through all that pain. We were still having joy, and having times of joy in between there. So I do agree with that. And definitely please share some resources with us on, because what I do is because of them we can. I get the subscription box every month. And it always has some kind of educational piece in there, some clothing or something that the kids can kind of relate to this person. This month was Michelle Obama for January. Aww. And so I steal their stuff too, like some of the stuff that's in the box. But so that's a fun way just to bring different, because there's people that the box have shared that I'm like, oh, I don't even know about this person. Like it wasn't like the regular, folks that we're used to. Right. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, we probably could go with this for days, but we can't. But we may definitely bring you back for some more of this, because it is important. And what we're trying to do with our podcast is really hone in specifically. Obviously, we're called Bold Black Girls. We are Bold Black Girls, but also this is for Black girls and women. And we want to make sure that we are equipping each other with what we need to, just thrive, right? And we need to know our history. We need to be able to teach our children. We are the teachers of our children. So, making sure that we're equipped with the knowledge. And something that I do is when I don't see something in the library, I go and I order it online. I tell them to get the library to order books. So that I've been seeing a lot more Black books in our libraries as well. But if we don't request that we want to see more Black books in the library, we're not going to see them. So that's one thing I know some people don't know about. Like, if you don't see something that you want in the library, tell them to order it, and they'll order it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's, especially nowadays with there being there's social media, social media can have, in my opinion, some stuff that could not be as uplifting and empowering, but it can as well at the same time. Yeah. And so you could use social media as a tool or a vehicle to also inform yourself. But I would also say you have the libraries, and there's so many more resources out there that are available that haven't been available before in the past. There are documentaries, things on Netflix you could check out. There's all different types of things. And I would just urge those tuning in, listening, at the same time, try to be mindful of what you're internalizing or taking in. Mm-hmm. I think everybody has a part to play in terms of being a little bit more critical of what we're given. So if they have the movie on Harriet Tubman, okay, well, one film does not equal all there is to know about Harriet Tubman. If they have if they have the Emmett Till story that's on now with his mother and they're chronicling that story, okay, that's fine for a start. But that is not, there's so much more as well too. So it's a journey. It is a journey. And Black people in every era have always been continuously pursuing upward mobility and trying to advance by way of education. And one of the things that I really want to say is that sometimes if we're not Black, if we don't consider ourselves Black, we'll think that, okay, well, I'll participate and try to learn and educate myself. It has nothing to do with me. I'll still see what's going on or what happened.
See what's going on.
But what we learning about Black history is not just for Black folk. Mm-hmm. When we it's for everybody. Everybody wins, because when you look at history, and I always say we shouldn't go at it to polarize or romanticize. We should use it to humanize. So even beyond race, even beyond these social constructs and things that are made up anyway, if we see individuals who are fighting to be respected and who are fighting to be included in what's supposed to be a fair, just society, if we see that individuals are trying to, connect with families and trying to make something of themselves and trying to advance, that is something that we all can connect to as human beings. We all can connect to that. So I think that history can be able to help us connect with each other. It could be able to heal us by having difficult conversations, coming to grips with things. It can give us gratitude and appreciation for what those that have gone through, that have come before us. And it can even give us empathy and compassion that we need so, so bad these days, because it helps us put ourselves in those shoes of those in the past. And we can say, wow, well, when they were backwards against the wall, they did this. Now I understand why they did it. If I was in their shoes, man, and it can inform us on how to move forward in the future. So, yeah.
I know I look at it and I'm like, ooh, I don't want to be them. I'm glad it wasn't my era. I'll see stuff. I'm like, wow, like you had to be a strong person to endure,
all the
so many things. And it makes you look at our situations now. We like, they did grateful. That so I don't have to, exactly. Even though I'm enduring my version, it's nothing compared to the stuff that they had to go through. So Absolutely. It gives you that little push to be like, I can do this. I can still do this. So Absolutely. Thank you again, Marcus, for joining us.
Let me give y'all some resources real quick.
Yeah.
Because when you talked about your experience with the boys at school, my daughter's was different because she went to an all-black school, and her teacher injected fun into it, right? So she was excited to go further in her pursuit of Black history. And with our kids, like I sent my little godson a book. I'm thinking like I need to send him a Black history book. What could I send him? What are some resources that we could leverage?
Sure. Okay, so I'm gonna give y'all some. So Learning for Justice, Hard History, K through 12 education. That's something that you could check out. The 1619 school curriculum project is something else that you could check out. There's actually a book Nicole Hannah-Jones has.
I got the book.
Yes. Born on Water, I believe is what the name is. It's a powerful book. I mean, it's eloquently written, but it's a book that a range of ages could be able to dissect and break down in terms of just history, especially African American history. There's also an entity called Melanese Media, I believe it's called, and it's MELANEYES Media, and they have a lot of great educational content in terms of presentations, discussions, and films. There is also, let me see what else there is. I want to make sure that I give y'all a few different things because, it's important to share these resources.
And we'll put those in the show notes if you can.
Yeah, we'll put them in the show notes as well. So if you could send it to us via email, that'd be great too. And that way, when we post the episode, we'll make sure to add it into the notes as well.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we needed, and definitely right now we need to keep this going and make sure that people are continuing to educate themselves because, again, all these laws getting passed and carrying on, we don't want to lose that. We need to keep it going. So thank you for helping us kick off Black History Month.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
Information.
Yeah, no problem. I really appreciate you both. This has been awesome. It's been fun. Of course, it's never enough time.
Is there any way that people can reach you? Where are you on social media? I know I just got him to get that LinkedIn going.
Yes. It was not active like it needed to be, but no, I thank you, Aries. We got to continue to support each other and push each other and get each other out there. But yes, you can access me through LinkedIn, Marcus Sankofa Nix. I'm also on Facebook, Marcus Sankofa Nix, Instagram, same thing, Marcus Sankofa Nix, and then I'm on Twitter. That's @NixMarcus. And so also, let me see, my email, mnicks@gmail.com. HISTORIAN @gmail.com. So if there's any questions or follow-up questions from those tuning in, listening, I do educational consulting. I speak. So I'm here, and
Yeah.
Aries and Kim, I'm looking to continue this relationship and this connection. It's been super, super cool.
Definitely. And if y'all need somebody to come to your company and speak, y'all can hire him to be a speaker and come and do some Black History stuff or any other kind of DEI educational things that you may need. Make sure you hit him up because he's definitely one that you want to add to your network.
Yeah, professional development, all of that.
Love it. All right, Marcus, you have a good rest of your day, and thank you
Yes,
again.
Marcus.
All right, thanks to you both.
Bye.
All right.